Hi AP Stats, we're going to be doing page 8 of the notes and we're going to talk about cumulative frequency and cumulative relative frequency. So here's our example. So example 15, in 1996, 50 bicycle riders died in fatal accidents in the state of New York. The table gives a relative frequency distribution for the ages of the 50 riders. Okay, so fill in the rest of the table. So frequency, that's just the count of people who fit in this category. So people who are 5 to less than 15, there are 8 people, so on and so on. Okay. Relative frequency, again, that just means we're going to write it as a proportion. Okay. So there were 50 total riders. So for the first one, we're just going to be doing 8 out of 50. Okay. Let's see if I can zoom this in a little bit. So that's going to be 0.16. We have 11 out of 50. Oh, sorry. So we get 0.22, 10 out of 50, and so on. So we're just going to divide all of these by 50. This is what we've talked about before. Okay. The new thing that we're going to be talking about is cumulative frequency. So cumulative means that we're going to be summing them as we go. So when we look at a particular category, it's not just going to be that category, it's going to be everything below that. It's cumulative. Okay. So the first category is actually the same because it's the first category. There's nothing that came before it. So we still divide. This is frequency. Sorry. So just the count, cumulative frequency, is going to be 8. Okay. But now when we get to 15 to 25, this is really 15 to 25 and everything below that. So here we're going to be adding the counts from both of the things below it. So 8 plus 11. Okay. So we get 19. And then the next box, this is everything below 35. So that means we need to sum 10, 11, and 8. Okay, it's everything below it. Okay, so we're at 29. Everything below 45. So we're going to be 9, 10, 11, and 8. Sum all those up. So we get 38. And so on. So basically 38 plus 7 is what we're doing. Everything below 55. Everything below 65. And then everything below 75. So we have our total 50. By the time we reach, less than 75 years of age, everyone would have had of the fatal accidents. They would have all happened by the age of 75. Okay. Okay, so cumulative relative frequency. Okay, the relative frequency is again the proportion. That's what this part means, proportion. So we're talking about a cumulative proportion. So now we're going to take our cumulative frequency and divide by our total, 50. Okay, so this one's the same because it's the first one to occur, but now we're looking at everything less than 25. So we take 19 out of 50. Okay, so we get 0.38 and so on. So 29 out of 50 and we're at 0.58. Okay, so since this is cumulative, it's everything below this point. So by the time we get to the end, we will have had everyone who had died by fatal accidents. So by the time we get to the end, we're going to be at 1 or 100%. Okay, so 38 divided by 50, 76, 0.9, 0.94, 1. Okay. All right, now we're going to talk about how to plot this. So cumulative relative frequency plot is just a graph of the cumulative relative frequencies against the upper endpoint of the corresponding interval. Okay, so the pairs, the upper endpoint of the interval and the cumulative relative frequency are plotted as points and connected by line segments. Okay, you also want to include the lower endpoint of the first interval at 0. Okay, so that's where we start. So what we're talking about, the first interval is 5 to less than 15, and our cumulative relative frequency is 0.16. Okay, so this actually gives us 2 points because this is the starting one. We're starting at 5, because that's like where our first class, part of the class goes. Our first point that we're going to plot is 5 comma 0, because we don't have any data prior to that. Then what this tells us right here, the pairs, the upper endpoint of the interval and the cumulative relative frequency. So the upper endpoint is 15. Oops, sorry, there's no decimal there. So that's 15. And our cumulative relative frequency is 0.16. Okay, so that one we actually get 2 coordinates out of. So on my x-axis, this is the age, okay, of the bicycle riders. So I've got 5, and then our intervals are basically going by 5, or by 10. So I'm just going to count by 10 up to 75, which was our max. And so this is the age of the bicycle riders. Okay. On the left side, we have our cumulative relative frequency. Okay, so I'm just going to abbreviate all those. And here our cumulative relative frequency goes all the way up to 1. So we have to have everything in there. Let's try that again. So I'm just going to count by 0.1. Okay. And I'm also going to put a little title. This is fatal accidents in New York, and this is in 1996. Okay, so like we said over here, we have 2 coordinates from the first class. We have 5 comma 0, so we get our first point, and then 15.16. We're just going to estimate that. So now we do the upper endpoint of the interval and our cumulative relative frequency. So from this one, we get 25 comma 0.38. And going on down, we're going to have 35 comma 0.58. Okay. So 25.38, 35.58, 45.76. Push too hard. 55.9. 65.94, and then 75 is 1. Okay, and then our directions say you're going to connect them by line segments. So they don't have to be a smooth curve. It's fine if they're straight line segments. Okay, so that's how you would draw this graph. Now, usually the thing is to be able to answer questions about it. Okay, so any point that we look at on here, so for example, if I look at the coordinates for 35 and 0.58, just this particular point here, this tells me that 58% of the fatal accidents happened for people who are age 35 or younger. Okay, or actually in this case, it's below 35 for our interval. So that's how you would interpret any of them. Okay, so what's the approximate proportion of the bicycle fatalities that were for people younger than 55? So we're going to go up to our graph at 55, this little point right here. And so we know based on our chart that was at 0.9. So here we have the approximate proportion is 0.9, or I mean you could write 90%, however you want to write it, are younger than 55. Okay, so for younger than 30, that's in between our intervals. So we are just going to approximate it as best we can. I'm gonna go over. So I'm guessing something kind of close to 0.45. So I would say probably approximately 0.45 were for 30, or people aged 30 or younger. Okay, what is the center of the distribution? This is a very common question. Okay, very good multiple choice question. I've seen this a lot where they give you the graph. Multiple choice question is what's the center of the graph? The center of the distribution is not the center of our x-axis. So in the middle of between 5 and 75. That is not what we're looking at. What we're looking at is actually we're going to be using, the center. Here we have cumulative frequencies. We're talking about the median. Where does the median occur? That's right in the middle. 50%. Okay, so it divides the data so that there's 50% lower, 50% above. So what we can do is we come up here on our y-axis. Here's our 0.5. We go over and we're just going to estimate this. So my estimate's just a little bit lower than 35, so I'm going to maybe say 33. So I'm going to say the center of the distribution is approximately 33 years of age. Okay. But this is a very common question to see. Question F, we haven't talked about what is the IQR, but that's also a very common question to talk about. So we'll talk about that on Wednesday after we talk about the IQR. Thanks.